Top 10 highest transfer fees received by Porto. The Portuguese league is a booming market for real talent in global football, so it's no surprise that the biggest clubs are constantly shopping there every transfer window. One particular Portuguese club that benefits greatly from this sort of business is FC Porto. Although they are arguably the biggest club in the country, Porto struggles to hold on to its finest talents when the big boys from the bigger leagues come knocking. Regardless, the club has a reputation for making healthy profits from player sales, so it's not all doom and gloom. At least, not for the bank statements. In this video, we take a look at the top 10 highest transfer fees received by Porto in the club's history. Coming in at number 10 is the Colombian forward Jackson Martinez. Martinez was a bit of a late bloomer that spent the better part of his younger years playing in his home country with Independiente Medellin, before venturing to Mexico with Jaguares in 2010. On July 7, 2012, Porto announced that they'd completed the signing of Jackson Martinez for a fee in the region of €9 million. He turned out to be a revelation at the club, scoring 92 goals in 135 appearances within 3 seasons. It was enough to convince La Liga big boys Atletico Madrid to put in a bid, and a deal was quickly completed to bring Martinez to Spain for €35 million in the summer of 2015. Porto got 3 excellent years of service and then made a healthy profit of €26 million on the sale. Not bad at all. An honourable mention should go to Fabio Vieira, a player who Porto sold to Arsenal in 2022 for the same price that Martinez went for. However, €35 million was worth just a bit more in 2015 compared to 2022, which is why Martinez made the cut. While Martinez's signing was the product of some fantastic scouting work from the team at Porto, Andrés Silva was one of their very own, a youth product. Although he spent the earlier years of his youth career with a couple of lesser-known youth teams in Portugal, Silva joined Porto's under-17 team in 2011 at the age of 15. From there, he quickly made progress, graduating to the under-19 team and then the FC Porto B team before linking up with the senior squad in 2013. Following an impressive 16 league goal season in 2017, Silva caught the eye of AC Milan all the way from Italy. The Serie A giants paid €38 million to bring him to the San Siro, offering Porto a significant profit on a player that they'd gotten for free. Things didn't quite work out for Andrés Silva in Italy, as he only managed 10 goals across 2 seasons with Milan. However, it's unlikely Porto would have cared too much with that money in the bag. Much like Andrés Silva, Fabio Silva is another product of Porto's youth system. In fact, his progression through the ranks was quite similar too, although he played briefly with Benfica's under-15 setup. Fabio Silva made his debut for Porto in the 2019-20 season at the age of 17, which is seriously impressive for a team of that caliber. However, he only made 21 appearances for the club before the Wolves in England came sniffing around to add him to their pack. It seemed like a great option for the youngster, because although he'd be leaving his home country at a tender age, he was joining a team that was well known for their Portuguese contingent of players. The expectation was that Fabio would have little to no trouble fitting in. That conviction was clear from how much Wolverhampton Wanderers were willing to pay for his signature. The club splashed €40 million on Fabio Silva in the summer transfer window of 2020, and he was immediately thrown into regular action with the first-team squad. For Porto, it was another case of massive profit gained from a free transfer. And for Wolves, it was the promise of a bright future with one of Europe's most wanted wonderkids. It feels like so long ago now when Radamel Falcao was tearing up the La Liga and UEFA Champions League with Atletico Madrid. In his prime, he was one of the most dangerous strikers around, but Atletico had paid good money for his services. Once again, a lot of credit must go to Porto's scouting system for unearthing this gem. For a meagre fee of 5.4 million euros, Falcao was brought in from Argentina, where he was plying his trade with River Plate. He was 23 years old at the time, and the year was 2009. It did not take long to see that this was a potentially world-class player, and Porto were probably resigned to the idea of losing him after a stunning debut season that produced 25 goals in only 28 league games. In the 2010-11 season, Falcao scored 38 goals in 42 games across all competitions, and the big clubs in top 5 leagues could no longer sit back and watch. Atletico Madrid made the first move, paying 40 million euros for the Colombian signature. Porto made a profit of about 35 million euros from the sale, and the rest, as they say, is history. Givanildo Vieira de Souza, the Brazilian forward popularly known as Hulk, is the only player in this video that did not play for a club in Europe's top 5 leagues. However, this is definitely not as a result of not being talented enough to do so. Hulk was still a teenager when he moved from his native country Brazil to Japan with Kawasaki Frontale. It's not the kind of move you see every day, but it stresses the determination of the player to make something of himself, doing what he knows best. As of 2008, when Porto discovered Hulk, he was 22 years old and playing with Tokyo Verdy. The club paid good money, about 19 million euros, to bring him to Portugal, clearly convinced by the 74 goals that he'd scored during his time in Asia. Their faith paid off after a couple of decent seasons with a standout 2010-11 season. Hulk scored 23 goals in 26 league appearances and laid on many more for his teammates. This was the point where he truly announced himself to the world. However, despite flirting multiple times with clubs in the top leagues, it was Zenit St. Petersburg who was willing to match Porto's transfer fee and Hulk's wage demands. They paid 40 million euros for him in the summer of 2012, and he went on to have a successful career in Russia. Vitinha is the most recent transfer in this video, but he's also perhaps the one with the least amount of hype surrounding his move. Considering what we've seen hype do to certain players, that might be a good thing. Yet again, this is another product of Porto's youth system. Vitinha had been at the club since 2013, but only got his breakthrough season in 2019. From then on, he made 59 appearances for Porto, excluding a loan move sandwiched in between his time there with Wolverhampton Wanderers in 2020. On paper, Vitinha is not the flashiest of players, but the scouting team at Paris Saint-Germain obviously saw something convincing enough to pay 41.5 million euros for. In July 2022, the player was unveiled at the Parc des Princes, linking him up with the likes of Kylian Mbappe, Lionel Messi, and Neymar. There is no doubt that Vitinha is a very talented player, but a nagging feeling remains that Porto were the biggest winners of this transfer. When you hear the name James Rodriguez, chances are the first thing that comes to mind is that Puskas winning goal against Uruguay at the 2014 World Cup. While that moment was undoubtedly one of the most important of his career, the Colombian attacking midfielder with a wand of a left foot had been building his name since his time with FC Porto. Signed from Banfield for 7.3 million euros, Rodriguez quickly adjusted to life in the Liga Sagres, establishing himself as a first-team regular, and then a key player. By 2013, his stock had risen enough to attract the attention of big spenders Monaco, who paid 45 million euros to bring him to France. He was not there for long. A month after scoring that wonder goal to send Colombia to the World Cup quarter-finals, Real Madrid announced that Rodriguez would be joining the club for a fee of 75 million euros. Porto certainly made a huge profit from his sale to Monaco, but the Liga 1 club ended up smiling to the bank too. Andre Silva's transfer to Milan might have worked out badly, but it was not as much of a flop as Eliaquim Mangala. Porto signed the French centre-back from the Standard Liga for 6.75 million euros in 2011, and he had a solid couple of years with the first team after initially struggling for game time in his debut season. When the then Manchester City manager, Manuel Pellegrini, endorsed a 45 million euro move for Mangala ahead of the 2014-15 season, some eyebrows were raised. However, his extremely solid debut against Chelsea put some of those nerves to rest. A series of howlers later, Mangala soon proved to be an expensive mistake. The record centre-back signing found the pace and the power of the Premier League too much to deal with, and Pellegrini's departure only made things worse as he was eventually frozen out of the team. Following in the footsteps of fellow Colombians Jackson Martinez, Radamel Falcao, and James Rodriguez, Luis Diaz joined Porto in 2019 for a fee of 7.2 million euros. His rise to the top was fairly quick after that, as he only spent 2.5 seasons in Portugal before turning the heads of Premier League giants Liverpool. The Merseyside club paid 47 million euros to bring him to Anfield in the winter transfer window of the 2021-22 season, and he immediately began to repay the faith with a handful of dazzling performances over the course of the rest of the season. Following Sadio Mane's departure from the club in 2022, Luis Diaz took on a more important role within the squad, contributing to a three-pronged attack, including Mohamed Salah and former Liga Sagra's rival, Darwin Núñez. All things considered, this transfer was a win for both Porto and Liverpool. It is an uphill task to replace one of the greatest centre-back pairings in modern football history, but that is certainly what Real Madrid were hoping Eder Militao would do when they signed him from Porto in 2019. Porto had initially bought the player to Portugal from Sao Paulo for a fee of 7 million euros in 2018. But his performance that season was good enough to convince a Madrid team who had finally let long-term servant Pepe leave the club the previous year. The Spanish club paid 50 million euros to prize Militao from the Dragos, handing them a 43 million euro profit on their initial outlay. Not bad for a one-year investment. If there's one thing to be learned from this video, it is that FC Porto has one of the best scouting and youth networks in all of Europe. The club's transfer model of finding cheap talent while also giving their youth players a chance has clearly done a lot for their finances, and extra credit should go to the management for staying competitive in Europe despite the regular losses of key players.